I was leaving the gynecology clinic when I saw my best friend, Vanessa Cole, coming out of the obstetrics wing with my husband. My own appointment had just ended. An ultrasound had found a small ovarian cyst that explained the cramps I had been having for weeks. The doctor wanted another scan in 6 weeks, but she had said the word benign twice, and I had finally started to breathe again. Then I spotted Vanessa at the far end of the hall, staring down at a folded report in her hands. I almost called her name. A man hurried toward her before I could. He took the papers from her, steadied her by the shoulder, and asked if she felt dizzy. When she nodded, he pulled a piece of candy from his coat pocket, unwrapped it, and held it to her lips. I stopped breathing. The man was my husband, Adrian Whitmore. The man I had loved for 8 years. The man I had been married to for almost 4. I stepped backward before either of them could see me and pressed myself against the cold tile wall around the corner. I covered my mouth with both hands because I was terrified some sound would come out of me. Through the narrow gap, I watched Adrian tuck a loose strand of hair behind Vanessa's ear. He took her bag from her shoulder and leaned down to say something that made her close her eyes. I knew that look on his face. He had worn it when I was sick, when my father was in the hospital, and on the day we registered our marriage at Boston City Hall. That day, he had smoothed my hair behind my ear and promised he would never let me feel alone again. Vanessa did not notice me. She stared at the papers in Adrian's hand, then placed one palm over her still flat stomach. Adrian followed the movement with his eyes. A slow smile appeared on his face. They walked toward the elevator together. I followed at a distance, not because I had decided to, but because my body moved before my mind did. In the underground garage, Adrian opened the passenger door of his black Mercedes and held one hand over the frame so Vanessa would not bump her head. The car pulled away. Its taillights stretched into 2 blurred red lines. I stood alone in the garage, shaking so hard my teeth hurt. It was early fall and not particularly cold, but sweat soaked the back of my blouse. My phone vibrated twice inside my bag. The first message was from Vanessa. "Claire, are the cramps any better? I had heat patches and ginger tea delivered to your apartment. Don't try to tough it out. I'm not feeling great either, so I'm skipping the studio this afternoon. Love you." The second was from Adrian. "Board meeting ran late, sweetheart. I can't make it to the hospital. Take a car home, and I'll bring you that Black Forest cake from the North End tonight. I'm sorry." I stared at the 2 messages until the words blurred. A conversation from the year before came back to me with brutal clarity. Vanessa had told me she had gotten back together with her ex. I told her she had lost her mind. She had spent years dragging herself out of that relationship. I had watched her stop eating, stop sleeping, and flinch every time her phone rang. Now she wanted to go back to the man who had broken her? She had never told me his name. Whenever I asked, she said his family had made the breakup ugly, and she would not drag anyone else into it until she knew whether the reunion was real. That afternoon, she sat across from me in a small cafe on Newberry Street, stirring a cup of coffee she never touched. The spoon clicked against the porcelain again and again. Finally, she looked up. "Maybe some people are just unfinished," she said. Her eyes were red, but she turned toward the window before I could ask why. "Claire, I'm not asking you to be happy for me." She swallowed. "I just hope that when you know everything, you won't hate me too much." At the time, I thought she was afraid I would judge her for returning to a relationship that had nearly destroyed her. So I stopped scolding her. I reached across the table, squeezed her hand, and told her that no matter what happened, she should never let anyone make her feel small again. Now, standing in the hospital garage, I understood what she had really been asking me to forgive. I bent over a trash can and gagged. They had just walked out of a prenatal appointment together. One was pretending to be the concerned best friend. The other was pretending to be the devoted husband. I did not know how to go home. I did not know how I was supposed to walk into my art consulting studio the next morning and sit across a conference table from Vanessa, my longtime brand consultant, while she casually asked what I wanted for lunch. So I did neither. I took leave from work and went straight to my parents' house in Newton. My mother was sorting handmade blankets for a charity sale when I walked in. My father was by the fireplace watching an old baseball game. Mom looked up first. The ball of yarn in her hand dropped to the floor. Claire? What happened? You look awful. Dad turned off the television and came toward me. The breath I had been holding since the hospital finally broke. Mom. Dad. My knees gave out in the entryway. I sank onto the rug and cried so hard I could barely form words. My mother knelt beside me and pulled me against her chest while I told them what I had seen and showed them the 2 messages. My father slammed his palm against the coffee table hard enough to rattle the cups. That bastard. I'm going to his office. He grabbed his jacket. I caught his sleeve. Dad, don't. He does this to you and you want me to stay here? I'm divorcing him, I said. My voice was shaking, but the decision was not. But I can't confront them yet. Why not? They've lied to me for a year. They already have explanations. If I go in angry, they'll cry, apologize, erase everything they can, and rewrite the rest. My mother studied my face. What do you want to do? I want to know what the last 8 years of my life were built on. Dad's chest rose and fell. At last, he sat down again. All right. I'll help you find a licensed investigator. And when you're ready, we'll hire the best family attorney we can. He put one hand on the top of my head the way he used to when I was a child. But listen to me. You are not unwanted. You did not lose to another woman. Whatever happens, this family can hold you. The clinic called the next morning to confirm that the cyst required monitoring, not surgery. I thanked the nurse, wrote the follow-up date on a scrap of paper, and put it in my bag. Then I stayed in bed for 3 days. On the 3rd afternoon, a private investigator placed a thick envelope on the table in front of me. I had expected proof of an affair. I had not expected to discover that my entire marriage was sitting in the middle of someone else's unfinished love story. Vanessa's ex was Adrian. They had met at 18 and dated until they were 22. 5 years together. Vanessa had never shown me a photograph of the man who had hurt her or told me his name. She always said the breakup had nearly destroyed her, and that his family had made the ending so ugly she had deleted every picture, every number, every trace of him. But an old social media account she had abandoned years ago still held photographs. In them, Adrian was young, sharp-edged, and completely unguarded. He looked at Vanessa with a kind of intensity one had never seen in our own pictures. He had once waited for her in the rain. He had fought with his parents over her. According to old messages, he had even gone down on his knees in front of his father and begged them to let him stay with her. At 22, Adrian's tuition, housing, and future position in the Whitmore family investment firm were still tied to a trust controlled by his parents. His family told him that if he continued seeing Vanessa, they would suspend his distributions and remove him from the company's succession track. His mother later approached Vanessa's mother with a non-disclosure agreement and what she called a relocation payment. Vanessa's mother was already struggling with debt and severe depression. After that confrontation, her condition deteriorated so badly that she nearly took her own life. Adrian accepted his family's terms. Vanessa moved to Chicago with her mother. For years, they both described what happened as if the world had torn them apart. I turned the pages slowly, feeling the air leave my chest. 8 years earlier, I had met Adrian at a Boston Arts Foundation fundraiser. We talked for more than 3 hours that night. About old movies, architecture, travel, vinyl records. He told me later that he had never met anyone who understood him the way I did. I had carried that sentence like proof that our love was rare. Then I read Vanessa's old posts. She loved old movies too. She collected records. She had once spent an entire night with Adrian searching for a historic theater that was about to be demolished. The Black Forest cake shop I supposedly loved had been introduced to me by Vanessa 7 years ago. The coffee I always ordered was the one she had taught me to drink. So many habits I thought were mine had grown out of my friendship with her. I suddenly could not bear to ask what Adrian had first seen when he looked at me. The investigator pushed a second envelope across the table. "There's more, Miss Bennett." Inside were printed messages supplied by Emily, Vanessa's college roommate. 7 years earlier, Vanessa had written, "Adrian has a girlfriend. Her name is Claire. She volunteers at the Museum of Fine Arts on Saturdays." I signed up. Emily had asked what she planned to do. Nothing, Vanessa replied. I just want to see what kind of woman he chose. That Saturday volunteer program at the museum was where Vanessa and I first met. A drunk visitor had become aggressive during an event. Vanessa stepped between us, took the impact when he shoved past, and bruised her arm against a display case. I went with her to urgent care and bought her dinner afterward. We talked until the restaurant closed. Within months, we were going to exhibitions together, traveling together, spending birthdays together. When I opened my own art consulting studio, I brought her on as a long-term brand consultant. Everyone said we had the kind of friendship that felt like family. It had not started by accident. The later messages hurt more. 3 months after meeting me, Vanessa wrote to Emily. She isn't what I expected. She's kind. I'm done asking about him. 6 months later. Claire wants to introduce me to her boyfriend. I know it's him. I can't tell her I won't go. I remembered that dinner perfectly. I had walked into the restaurant with my arm linked through Adrian's, excited to introduce the two people I cared about most. Vanessa had risen from the table with all the color gone from her face. Adrian paused for barely a second before offering his hand. Hi, Adrian. Vanessa, she said. Claire talks about you all the time. I had laughed because they were acting so formal. I had even insisted they sit next to each other. Now every pause and every avoided glance had an explanation. Emily had not handed over Vanessa's entire private history. She provided only the messages that involved me. She made that decision after Vanessa called her from the rented apartment, admitted she was pregnant, and still insisted she could not tell me until Adrian was ready. Emily told the investigator she could no longer help Vanessa turn my life into collateral damage. Vanessa told her she did not want to destroy my marriage, but she could not bear to lose Adrian again. Emily urged her to walk away. Vanessa replied, This time I didn't steal him. He came back first. I stared at that sentence for a long time. It did not matter who opened the door first. Vanessa had still let him in. And I had been standing inside that house, trusting both of them. The affair had not begun with one random phone call. In the months before our 3rd anniversary, Adrian and Vanessa had spent more time together on a museum fundraising campaign I was too busy to oversee. They kept their messages formal, but Vanessa's notes to Emily showed the tone changing. Adrian complained that his father's approaching retirement had turned his entire life into a reward for obedience. Vanessa wrote that he kept asking whether either of them had ever chosen their own future. The night before Adrian and I celebrated our 3rd wedding anniversary, his father praised him at a client dinner as the son who had always understood duty. Adrian drank too much afterward and called the number he still knew by heart. Vanessa went to the hotel to pick him up. They did not leave the room until morning. The next day, Adrian came home carrying white roses. He said he had drunk too much and his phone had died. He also brought a Black Forest cake from the North End. That same morning, Vanessa sent me a photograph of the sunrise over the water. She said she had gone away alone to clear her head and was finally ready to let go of the past. I wrote back, When you get home, I'm introducing you to someone who actually deserves you. She answered with a hugging emoji. From then on, they met at hotels and at a rented apartment near the harbor. The investigator had not accessed medical records. Everything he showed me came from legal surveillance in public spaces, public posts from Vanessa's old account, and financial records I already had the right to review as a joint cardholder. For a year, our family credit card had repeatedly been used at the same harbor hotel, the same apartment parking garage, and the same North End jewelry store. For several weeks, the investigator photographed Adrian entering the apartment on Wednesday and Friday nights and leaving early the next morning. He also photographed Adrian and Vanessa walking into a building that housed an obstetrics clinic. The picture proved only that they had entered together. It contained no diagnosis and no private medical information. The pregnancy was something I suspected because of what I had seen with my own eyes. Based on the timing, Vanessa had been around 12 weeks pregnant at the hospital. By our anniversary party a month later, she would be close to 16 weeks. A loose dress could disguise it, but not completely. I thought I had already learned the worst. Then the investigator handed me a flash drive. He had compiled material from Vanessa's public archive, family videos I legally possessed, and my own wedding footage. The first clip was more than a decade old. A young Adrian stood beside an old lighthouse on Cape Cod. He fastened a silver laurel leaf necklace around Vanessa's neck and smiled toward the person filming. "Every time you turn around," he told her, "I'll be there." My hand went to my own throat. Before our wedding, Adrian had given me an almost identical laurel leaf necklace. He had proposed beside that same lighthouse. He had said the same words. The next clip came from our wedding. Adrian held my hands and said, "You're the only person in this world who truly understands me." Then the screen shifted to footage from Vanessa's 20th birthday. He held her in front of a cheering group of friends and said, "You're the only person in this world who truly understands me." I turned off the computer and sat in the dark until evening. Adrian had cared for me. That was true. He had stayed all night when my father was hospitalized. He had cooked for me during the busiest season of my career. He had canceled an important meeting to attend my grandmother's funeral. Those things were real. But even when he loved me, he could not be bothered to learn a new language for it. The same lighthouse. The same necklace. The same promise. Everything I had thought belonged only to us had already belonged to someone else. And that woman had later stood beside me as my maid of honor. Vanessa had cried so hard in the bridal suite that morning that I held her and promised marriage would never change our friendship. Now I knew what she had been looking at while she cried. I stayed alone in my room for the rest of the day. The next morning, I washed my face and called a family attorney. I instructed her to file for divorce in Suffolk Probate and Family Court. Our finances would be handled under our prenuptial agreement, our marital property records, and Massachusetts law. I did not ask for Adrian to be left with nothing. I did not intend to use Vanessa's pregnancy as leverage. The child had done nothing to me, and I would not expose private medical information that did not belong to me. I asked my attorney for two things: preserve the joint financial records and the lawfully obtained photographs, and document the timeline clearly enough that no one could later rewrite the story as two soulmates reuniting while a bitter wife refused to step aside. They had already spent a year building explanations. If I served Adrian privately and disappeared, he could call our separation mutual, introduce Vanessa months later, and let our shared circle believe two old loves had simply found their way back to each other. My silence would become their alibi. I would not post the evidence online or expose Vanessa's private medical information. But the family, friends, and professional contacts whose trust had supported our public marriage would hear the timeline once, from me, before either of them rewrote it. Then I went home. A floor lamp was on in the living room. Adrian sat on the sofa in gray lounge clothes. The moment I walked in, he stood, took my bag, and pulled me into his arms. "You're finally home. Is your mom all right?" I had told him she was not feeling well. He held me tightly, his voice carrying just enough hurt to sound convincing. "You disappeared, barely answered your phone. You scared me." The scent of his body wash had once meant safety. Now it brought back the image of him closing Vanessa's car door in the hospital garage. I fought the urge to push him away. Things were messy at my parents' place. I stayed a few extra days. He leaned back and studied my face, searching for something. A few seconds later, his shoulders relaxed. "You still look pale. I'll ask Martha to make chicken soup tomorrow." Then, as naturally as if he were mentioning the weather, he said, "Vanessa keeps asking about you. She says the studio is miserable without you there." I looked up at him and smiled. "I miss her too." He saw nothing wrong. I sat beside him and waited until the silence felt ordinary. "Next month is our 4th anniversary," I said. "I want to throw a party. Invite our families, friends, everyone." He looked surprised. "You want a big one? We've been too busy the last few years." I met his eyes. "I want this anniversary to be memorable. Is that a problem?" "Of course not." He took my hand and kissed my knuckles. "Whatever you want. I'll handle the venue and the guest list." The next morning, I called Vanessa. She answered on the first ring. "Claire. Finally. Are you feeling better?" "I've been worried sick." Her concern was flawless. "I'm fine now." I stood beside the windows of my studio, watching traffic move along Newberry Street. "Adrian and I are having a 4th anniversary party next month. You're my best friend. You have to be there. The line went quiet for 2 seconds. Of course. Send me the details. Where's something beautiful, I said softly. I have a big surprise for you. She gave a strained laugh. Don't waste money on me. After we hung up, I stared at her name on the screen. I knew her clothing size. I knew coffee on an empty stomach made her sick. I knew when she was pretending to be angry, what she usually needed was a hug. She knew I hated lies more than almost anything. She had still looked me in the face and performed for an entire year. The day before the party, my attorney brought me the divorce petition, the preliminary financial disclosure list, and a proposed settlement framework. I signed every page that required my name. The petition would be filed the next morning. A licensed process server would deliver Adrian's copy before the party ended. That night, Adrian came home late. He wrapped his arms around me from behind while I stood in front of the bedroom mirror. Tomorrow is going to be beautiful, he murmured, his chin resting against my shoulder. In the mirror, his eyes were fixed on my face. Warm, attentive, almost convincing. Adrian, I said, have you ever regretted marrying me? His arms tightened for a fraction of a second. What kind of question is that? Just answer it. Marrying you was the best decision I ever made. What if the person you loved before me came back? There was half a beat of silence. Then he smiled and pinched my cheek. There is no what if. The past is the past. I nodded. That night, he slept deeply. At 2 a.m, I rolled my suitcase out of the bedroom. Our wedding photograph stood on the entryway table. I did not break it. I did not take it with me. I removed my wedding ring and placed it against the frame. The next evening, Adrian hosted our anniversary party in the largest ballroom of an old waterfront hotel in Boston Harbor. The room was filled with white roses flown in from the Netherlands. Our wedding photographs moved across the enormous screen behind the stage. Our families were there. College friends. Arts Foundation board members. Business partners. People who had watched us build a life together. Vanessa arrived in a loose champagne-colored dress. A month had passed since the hospital. At nearly 16 weeks, the curve of her stomach was not dramatic, but it was there if anyone looked closely. She stayed near the dessert table and kept a careful distance from Adrian. Once or twice, their eyes met. Both looked away too quickly. At exactly 7, the ballroom doors opened. My parents entered with my attorney and the hotel manager. Adrian immediately looked behind them. Where's Claire? Vanessa stepped closer. Her face had gone pale. Is she still getting ready? My mother did not answer either of them. She walked to the control table and picked up a microphone. I'm sorry, everyone. Claire will be joining us a little later. She looked over the room. Before she comes in, she asked you to watch something. Adrian frowned. Whatever this is, it can wait. This is our anniversary. That is exactly why it can't, my mother said. She pressed play. Our wedding photographs disappeared. The screen divided in two. On the left, 19-year-old Vanessa stood with Adrian beside an old lighthouse on Cape Cod. On the right, 30-year-old me stood with him in the same place. On the left, Adrian fastened a silver laurel leaf necklace around Vanessa's neck. On the right, he placed its twin around mine. His voice played from both videos. Every time you turn around, I'll be there. The room slowly went silent. Someone recognized Vanessa and inhaled sharply. Adrian's face changed. He started toward the control table. Turn it off. The hotel manager stepped between him and the equipment. The next pair of clips appeared. On the left, Adrian held Vanessa at her 20th birthday party. You're the only person in this world who truly understands me. On the right, he held my hands at our wedding and repeated the exact same sentence. Then came 2 photographs. One showed Adrian and Vanessa years earlier outside the North End Bakery, Vanessa holding a Black Forest cake. The other showed our anniversary table, year after year, with the same cake in the center. Whispers moved through the room. Adrian's mother rose from her chair. Her eyes moved from the screen to Vanessa's hand over her stomach. What is this? She demanded. Then her voice dropped. Adrian, is there something else you failed to tell this family? Vanessa took 1 step backward and covered her stomach with her hand. The screen continued. A year of charges from our joint credit card appeared. Harbor hotels, apartment parking, the jewelry shop in the North End. Then came the investigators' photographs from hotel lobbies, public garages, and the entrance to the waterfront apartment building. There were no bedroom pictures. No hospital charts. Nothing stolen from a private account. The final photograph showed Adrian supporting Vanessa as they walked into the building that housed the obstetrics clinic. Beneath it was only a date. No diagnosis. No statement about a child. No one in the ballroom spoke. Vanessa's hand tightened over the visible curve beneath her dress. Several guests looked at her stomach, then at Adrian. Adrian spun toward the screen. "Turn this off. You have no right to put us on trial. Where is Claire?" The screen changed one more time. Vanessa's 7-year-old message to Emily filled the wall. "Adrian has a girlfriend. Her name is Claire. She volunteers at the Museum of Fine Arts on Saturdays. I signed up. I just want to see what kind of woman he chose." Vanessa swayed. That was the moment she understood that I knew not only about the affair, but about the reason she had first entered my life. The side door opened. I walked into the ballroom wearing a white tailored suit instead of an evening gown. Every face turned toward me. Adrian moved first. "Claire, let me explain." I raised one hand. "Stay there." He stopped several feet away. Across the room, Vanessa was already crying. "Claire." I looked at her. "The first time I met you was at the Museum of Fine Arts. You stepped between me and a drunk man who was causing a scene. You bruised your arm against a display case. I took you to urgent care, bought you dinner, and spent years believing I had been lucky enough to meet a friend I would have for the rest of my life." Vanessa's lips trembled. "At first, I did go there because of him," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but the room was so quiet that everyone heard. "I wanted to see you. But what came after wasn't fake. Claire, I really did love you as my best friend. I believe you." She looked startled. "I believe you meant it when you sat with me in the hospital. I believe you grieved with me when my grandmother died. The birthdays, the trips, the nights we stayed awake talking, I don't think every one of them was a performance." I paused. "That is why I still cannot understand how someone who truly loved me as a friend could help me choose a wedding dress, stand beside me as my maid of honor, and then go into a hotel room with my husband the night before our 3rd anniversary." Vanessa covered her mouth and folded forward as she cried. "I only went to pick him up. He was drunk. He kept saying my name. I thought about pushing him away. I swear I did. But you didn't." She shook her head violently. "You had hundreds of chances after that. You could have stopped when you helped me shop for his anniversary gift. You could have stopped when you encouraged me to have a baby with him. You could have told me when you found out you were pregnant." My voice stayed level. "You chose not to. Every time. I was afraid you would hate me," she whispered. "And I was afraid he would go back to you. He was already with me." She went still. Adrian stepped in. "Claire, most of this is my fault. Don't push her right now. She can't handle this kind of stress." I turned to him. "You still think I'm the one doing this to her?" "That isn't what I meant." For the first time, real panic broke through his polished expression. "I know I never got over the past. But I never planned to divorce you." Vanessa lifted her head sharply. "What did you say?" Adrian would not look at her. "This isn't the time." "Why not?" She walked toward him. "You said you owed me a home. You said that when the time was right, you would take care of everything." She pressed her palm against her stomach. "This baby is yours. You told me once Claire knew, we wouldn't have to hide anymore. She knows now. Everyone knows." Her voice cracked. "Tell them. Are you going to marry me?" A muted wave of shock moved through the ballroom. Adrian's mother recovered before anyone else. Her expression tightened into calculation. "No one signs or promises anything tonight," she said. "This will be handled through counsel." Vanessa looked at her, and for the first time I saw the old fear return to her face, the same fear she must have felt when this family pushed her out years ago. Adrian still said nothing. I had not shown anyone a medical record. I had not announced her pregnancy. The child did not deserve to be used as evidence or punishment. Vanessa had said it herself. Adrian stood silent. It was only a few seconds. It was long enough for everyone to see his answer. Say something, Vanessa demanded. I'll take responsibility for the baby, Adrian said at last. But marriage is not something we decide in the middle of a scene like this. Vanessa stared at him as though he had struck her. Then she laughed. It sounded worse than crying. You once fought your entire family for me. Now all I'm asking is for you to say you'll marry me, and suddenly it's complicated. Adrian's jaw tightened. We're not 20 anymore. Life is more complicated than you think. The fight went out of her face. For more than a decade, she had missed the boy who stood in the rain for her and challenged his family. The man in front of her had learned how to postpone promises until the right time, call a pregnancy a responsibility, and keep two women waiting while he decided what would cost him less. Adrian turned back to me. Claire, I know those videos hurt. But the 8 years we had were real. He took a step closer. I love you. Then why did you give me everything you had already given her? He stopped. I gestured toward the screen. The same lighthouse. The same necklace. The same vow. Even the cake you bought for every anniversary was her favorite. That isn't what it means. You may have loved me, I said. But you couldn't even be bothered to love me in a new way. His face drained of color. No. Claire, listen. I took you to the lighthouse because it mattered to me. I wanted to share the most important place in my life with you. But you never told me why it mattered. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. You always said I understood you better than anyone, I continued. But you never gave me the chance to know you. You buried your past, placed her in the middle of my life, and expected me to believe the two of you were strangers. My attorney stepped beside me. A licensed process server followed. He confirmed Adrian's identity and handed him a copy of the divorce petition and summons that had been filed that morning. I placed the proposed settlement on a nearby table. The house, the accounts, and the rest of our marital property will be handled under the prenup and the law. I'm not asking to leave you with nothing. I'm also not going to protect your reputation anymore. I met his eyes. You can negotiate through counsel, or you can answer in court. Either way, this marriage is not going back to yesterday. Adrian did not touch the documents. I won't agree to this. You don't have to agree for the divorce to begin. My mother came forward carrying a thick scrapbook. Vanessa had made it for my birthday the previous year. Across the cover, she had written, "For Claire, our first 7 years." Inside were ticket stubs from our first trip, exhibition passes, notes she had written while I was in the hospital, and a photograph of her adjusting my veil on my wedding day. I held it out to her. She shook her head. No. Claire, please. Those memories were real. I know. I placed the scrapbook on the table beside her. That's why I'm not burning it. I'm not tearing it apart. But I'm not keeping it for you anymore. Her hand landed on the cover. Tears dropped onto the words she had written. I turned away. Adrian followed and reached for my wrist. I stepped back. Don't touch me. Claire, let's go home and talk. That is not my home anymore. I'll end it with Vanessa. A few feet behind him, Vanessa looked up. Adrian did not even turn toward her. I'll support the child, but I won't let this destroy us. Give me one chance. I'll change anything. I was suddenly too tired to be angry. You're not saying you'll end it because you finally understand what you did. My voice was quiet. You're saying it because I'm actually leaving. His eyes filled. What do you expect me to do? Stand here and let you walk away? Yes. I nodded. This time, you get to live with someone else's choice. I left the ballroom. Behind me, Adrian called my name. Then Vanessa's voice broke through the room. What did you just say? You're ending it with me. Adrian told her not to make things worse. Something hit the floor. Later, my mother told me Vanessa had thrown the scrapbook. Its pages came apart and photographs slid across the floor. When people tried to help, Vanessa dropped to her knees and gathered every picture back into her arms. I did not look back. Outside the ballroom, my mother took my hand. Her palm was warm and damp. My father walked on my other side, his expression grim. What do you want for dinner? He asked. I thought about it. Thai. The hottest tom yum and red curry they have. Adrian had a sensitive stomach. For years, I had avoided spicy food without even noticing how completely I had adjusted my life around him. Dad blinked, then nodded. The place you loved as a kid? That one. The three of us sat in a small restaurant in Cambridge that night. The food was so spicy my eyes watered continuously. Mom asked if I wanted something milder. I shook my head and took another spoonful of curry. For once, the tears were only from the heat. The next day, I moved into the apartment I had bought before the marriage. It was small, with a view of the Charles River. I had not lived there in years, and dust covered the windowsills. My mother wanted me to move back home. I refused. I had done nothing wrong. I did not need to hide behind my parents, and I did not need to abandon my city because of Adrian and Vanessa. I had the walls repainted. The cold gray Adrian preferred became a soft, warm white. I did not fill the living room with white roses. I placed a pot of yellow tulips by the window. Adrian called every day. At first, he explained. Then he apologized. Eventually, every message became the same question. When are you coming home? I did not block him. I forwarded everything to my attorney. 3 weeks later, I found him waiting outside my building after dark. He stood beside his car holding a familiar bakery box. Claire. He hurried toward me and offered it with both hands. Your favorite. I looked at the box. Are you sure it's my favorite? He blinked. You always finished it. The first time, you bought it for me and said I would love it. I didn't want to disappoint you. I gave a small laugh. Then Vanessa kept buying it too, so I assumed it must be my taste. His fingers tightened around the box. What do you actually like? It was a question he had never asked in 8 years. Lemon tart. I walked past him into the building. He remained on the sidewalk. This time, he did not follow. Once the divorce case was underway, our attorneys exchanged financial disclosures. Adrian offered me the house and most of our joint savings if I withdrew the petition and agreed to counseling. I refused. Every room in that house held his choices and Vanessa's fingerprints. The property would be divided under our agreement. I would take what belonged to me and nothing more. After the party, Vanessa moved into the apartment Adrian had rented for her, convinced that my departure had finally cleared the way for the life they had been denied. Adrian spent very few nights there. After the evening with the bakery box, my attorney warned him that all further contact had to go through counsel. He stopped waiting outside my building and returned instead to the empty marital home. Mutual friends saw him and Vanessa arguing outside restaurants and in parking lots. I asked them not to report back to me. Then, 2 months later, Vanessa sent me a voice message. Her voice was hoarse. A door slammed somewhere in the background. Claire, he wasn't like this before. She paused to breathe. His mother came with the family attorney. They want a paternity test, a confidentiality agreement, and a co-parenting contract. She said the baby's education and trust could be discussed, but marriage was not part of the discussion. Another pause. He sat there and didn't defend me once. She started crying. I asked him if he remembered kneeling in the rain for me. He said people can't stay 18 forever. At the end of the message, she whispered, "Was he like this with you too?" I listened once. I did not reply. She wanted me to tell her Adrian had changed, or that he behaved this way only because he no longer loved her. It was no longer my job to explain him. A few days later, Adrian asked to meet at my attorney's office. He looked thinner. His eyes were bloodshot. I ended it with her, he said before he had even sat down. I'll support the child, but I'm not marrying Vanessa. I kept reading the settlement draft. That is between the two of you. I spent years believing I owed her an ending. His voice dropped. When we were finally together again, I realized I might have been trying to recover the person I was back then. I looked up. That is something you should say to Vanessa. What I'm trying to tell you is that you're the person I love. Adrian. I stopped him. When you missed her, you went behind my back to find her. Now that the two of you cannot live together, you've come back to tell me you love me. I pushed the settlement toward him. I am not the woman you used to test which one of us you really want. His face lost what little color it had. I know I don't deserve another chance. But 8 years, Claire. The 8 years happened, I said. Divorce doesn't erase them. But their existence does not entitle you to another 8. He stared at the papers for a long time. Then he picked up the pen and signed. Several months later, a judge reviewed and approved our agreement. The divorce became final after a short hearing at the Suffolk County Courthouse. We walked out separately. Sunlight spilled across the stone steps. Near the bottom, a young couple who had just completed a civil ceremony were taking photographs. The woman laughed so hard her eyes disappeared. Adrian stopped behind me. "Claire." I turned. "If I hadn't made that call to Vanessa that night," he said, "do you think we would have been happy?" He was still placing everything on one drunken phone call, as though the year of meetings, lies, and mornings after had happened without his consent. "But you did call her," I said. "And every time you saw her after that, every time you came home and held me, every time you sat between the two of us and pretended you had never met, those were things you did while you were sober." He lowered his head. I walked down the steps. My parents were waiting at the curb. Mom waved through the window. When I got into the car, she handed me a paper bag. I stopped at a bakery. Inside were 2 lemon tarts. "How did you know?" I asked. "You used to demand one every time we drove to your grandmother's house." She studied me. "Then you started dating Adrian, and suddenly every family celebration had Black Forest cake. I thought your taste had changed." I bit into the tart. The lemon was sharp enough to make me squint. Some preferences had never disappeared. No one had asked about them in a very long time. Vanessa later gave birth to a healthy boy. A paternity test confirmed Adrian was the father. Their attorneys arranged child support, visitation, and medical insurance. He did not marry her. Before the baby was born, the Whitmore family attorney again asked Vanessa to sign strict confidentiality and trust management terms. She refused, and the negotiations became ugly. Eventually, she returned to Chicago with the baby and moved in with her mother. Adrian visited according to the parenting schedule. Outside those visits, he and Vanessa rarely saw each other. For years, they had blamed family, money, and distance for keeping them apart. When none of those things stood between them anymore, they still could not build a life together. I did not feel as triumphant as people expected me to. Mostly, that year had been loud, and I was relieved to have left the room where their names kept echoing. I began giving my time back to myself. I went to exhibitions on weekends. Sometimes I drove out of the city alone. When friends invited me to dinner, I stopped checking the menu first to make sure there would be something Adrian could eat. I did not become a different woman overnight. There were still nights when I could not sleep. Passing the old bakery in the North End still brought back the 2 messages in the hospital garage, but those moments became shorter. A year after the anniversary party, an unsigned package arrived at my apartment. Inside was the scrapbook Vanessa had thrown across the ballroom floor. She had carefully reattached every photograph and flattened the bent corners. A handwritten letter had been added to the last page. "Claire, I'm sorry. I first approached you because of him. I wanted to know whom he had chosen and whether he was happy without me. Later, I truly did love you as my best friend. Because that part was real, telling you became harder every day. I was afraid you would leave me first. I was also afraid he would go back to you. I kept calling us fate. Looking back, it wasn't fate. I refused to let go, and he refused to take responsibility. You do not owe me forgiveness. I only wanted to return this. The happy days inside it were real to me. I sat by the window and turned through every page. The first photograph showed us outside the museum. Vanessa still had gauze taped over her bruised arm. I was holding 2 drinks and smiling without suspicion. There were photographs of us running through rain, notes from the night I stayed awake with her after a breakup, and the picture of her adjusting my veil before the wedding. The woman in those photographs had been genuinely happy. The care I gave had been genuine too. What Vanessa did later did not make the person I had been foolish. At the wedding page, I removed the photograph of the 3 of us. Adrian stood on my left. Vanessa stood on my right. They smiled across me like 2 polite strangers meeting for the first time. I tore that photograph in half and dropped it into the trash. I left the rest of the scrapbook intact. I did not answer her letter, and I did not put the scrapbook back on my shelf. I closed it inside a box and placed it at the back of a cabinet. A car horn sounded below my window. My mother called to tell me everyone was waiting for dinner. I put on my coat, turned off the light, and locked the door behind me. I did not wonder whether Adrian and Vanessa would find their way back to each other again. That was no longer my story.